Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Sideways from 2004, starring Paul Giamatti, Thomas Hayden Church, Virginia Madsen, and Sandra Oh, directed by Alexander Payne. And why did I say from 2004? Because this is the original, whereas there was a remake that came out, I think, 5 years later. And I hear it's not as good as this movie, but was this movie good? Let's get into it and find out. We open on a Saturday morning while Miles Raymond, played by Paul Giamatti, wakes up from a neighbor knocking on the door, asking him to move his car someplace else. And after he does so, he sees he's late for a trip he's going to with his friend Jack, played by an Oscar winning role by Thomas Hayden Church, as he gets ready and he starts from where he lives in San Diego, California, to where he picks up Jack at his house in Los Angeles, California at 12 o'clock p.m., I'll say. And Jack is getting married to a woman named Christine, as where they're going is for Jack's bachelor party, as Miles is the best man at his wedding. And when Miles arrives at the house in LA, Miles tries two different cakes, and his friends know about Miles' books, which is almost published but not quite finalized yet, as he has yet to hear from his agent, or editor, I'll say it best. These are absolutely likable characters, in my opinion, as we move on to Miles and Jack leaving the house in LA, and Jack opens a 1992 Byron wine when in Miles' car, as this is a movie about a couple of friends going up to Northern California for a friend's wedding while drinking wine. And I have to confess, I don't drink too much alcoholic beverages unless on occasions, as this is based on a novel by Rex Pickett, which I've never read, nor have I seen the remake of from 2009. As I hear that one was bad, but this movie is well written and well made, as the adaptation of Rex Pickett's novel is well written by Alexander Payne, as this movie is well made. Miles and Jack get to Miles' mother's house in Oxford, California to visit his mother for her birthday, as they bring her flowers and have a birthday dinner for her while Miles steals some money from her drawer, which makes him a horrible son, while we learn Miles was married to a woman named Victoria and ended up divorcing 2 years ago, as there's dialogue about him at the birthday celebration scene. As we move on to Sunday coming, and Miles wakes up Jack, and Jack tries to turn off the TV, but Miles tells him not to wake her up, and they go to a diner, and Jack tells Miles he's going to get laid because of Jack himself, and they get to Santa Barbara County to drink some wine. And the cinematography is absolutely beautiful in this movie, and the editing is tightly done, as I never was bored, as I've seen this movie a lot of times. Miles and Jack get to their motel and walk to a restaurant for dinner, as the dialogue is tremendously said by the actors, while Miles and Jack get to the restaurant and meet Gary the bartender and make a toast to Jack's last week of freedom. And we move on to the restaurant's waitress named Maya, played by Virginia Madsen, who's well known from the original Candyman movie from the 1990s, which I've seen once in my life. I don't remember too much about it. And she says hello to Miles and meets Jack, and they meet up later at the bar where Gary works at, and Maya gets to know Miles. And Jack is an actor from a commercial, played in a character in a show where he played Dr. Derek Summersby. And Miles says we might go back to the motel and crash, and while they walk back, Jack is upset with Miles for saying that, while Jack brought up Miles' book. And we move on to Monday, where Miles and Jack talks to Miles and about how he's going to get laid, and tells Miles to not fuck it up. And there's a reason Thomas Hayden Church won the Best Supporting Actor for this role, as he played this character well done. Miles and Jack do a lot of wine tasting, and fun fact about wine, it's made from grapes, while they meet Stephanie, played by Sandra Oh, in a great performance, as Jack is in love with her and buys a whole bunch of wine and makes plans with her, and she calls up Maya to get together with them, and they visit a hill filled with grapes, as Jack confesses Victoria is coming to the wedding, and tells Miles that, and tells Miles also that she got remarried, and he grabs a bottle of wine And Miles runs while Jack chases him, and eventually they stop. And now Miles is depressed because Jack talked to Victoria behind Miles's back. And that's great acting by Paul Giamatti, as I only know him from the wacky roles, like, well, when I saw this originally, like in movies like Big Fat Liar or anything animated roles where he's comedic, and the Tim Burton remake of Planet of the Apes where he was an ape. And they go back to the motel room, and Miles falls asleep while Jack goes to the pool for a swim. And they meet Maya and Stephanie in Los Olivos to have some dinner while Miles almost leaves if anybody drinks Merlot, and starts meeting up at the dinner table. And the chemistry between everyone is working quite well, as this movie holds up for 2004, which I want to. Yeah, it's like 21 years later. They have dinner and drink wine while Jack hits on Stephanie, and eventually Miles gets drunk and dials Victoria because he's depressed about her getting remarried to a different man named Ken. And sometimes this movie goes through funny routes as well as depressing routes, as this is a dark comedy, and this is depressing as a route when he calls Victoria drunk, and he says it was better for him to not go to Victoria's wedding to begin with, as the ladies leave, and Jack knows Miles called Victoria while he's not comfortable with what Jack wants to do, which is party with Maya and Stephanie and getting laid with them. As the ladies come back, and Stephanie offers them to go to her place, and Jack starts smooching Stephanie up a storm while Miles just sits down and talks with Maya while drinking wine. And her monologue about her life in school is tremendous, and I believe it from Virginia Madsen, as the score is very good in that scene. Miles washes his face and thinks about how fucking sick he is listening to Jack's like a snap of a finger, and he gets out of the restroom and kisses Maya, and she walks away, and they drive out in two different cars, and Maya tells Miles how much she had a nice time with him and gives her his novel to read after showing him where to go. And Tuesday comes, and Christine nonstop calls Jack while out of the room as well as the motel, and Jack comes back to the room and changes plans on Miles at the last minute. And before Jack leaves, Miles tells her to check her messages, or his messages, excuse me, and gives her a call and tells Miles to wait outside. And Miles talks with Stephanie about how much they had fun last night. And Jack takes off with Stephanie on a motorcycle while Miles is all alone and writes a different novel. And he calls his publisher nonstop, wondering about his novel, the one that's currently supposed to be published or something. And he comes back to the room seeing Jack humping Stephanie in the ass, which is rather fucking random, as he walks to the bar, and eventually Jack joins him at the bar for a drink. And Jack is very happy with Stephanie, and Miles is uncomfortable as he's worried about Jack's life with Christine, while Jack is wanting to move to the area, and Miles can own a wine company, and that is a scary situation that can be turned upside down, and it will in a little while, and it reminds me of life in general, and that's a good thing. Miles and Jack hang out with Maya, Stephanie, and her daughter Sienna, as well as Stephanie's mother, Carol, at the bowling alley, and Miles hangs out and reads a magazine and falls asleep until he wakes up and goes to the restaurant where Maya works at, and sees Gary at the bar, but no Maya, and walks back to the motel all drunk and shit. And we move on to Wednesday with Miles and Jack playing a game of golf. And Jack talks a lot about how Maya is in love with Miles and brings up about the novel. And at one point, Miles gets frustrated with Jack as things go wrong, and someone hits a golf ball to tell him to hurry it up. And Miles hits a golf ball back at those motherfuckers, telling them to hurry up, and scares the shit out of them Jack scares the shit out of him, by acting like a fucking maniac, which is the funniest scene in the whole movie, as it never fails to make me laugh. Miles and Jack pick up Maya, and they go wine tasting and see all the different wines around a museum of some kind, and that's a picnic, and then goes on a picnic in the middle of the park somewhere and play a game of Stephanie's house. And Maya does bring Miles back to her house and have a sleepover, and I really like the chemistry as we move on to Thursday while Maya is awake and Miles is asleep. And they go outside to have a nice time until Miles confessed Jack is getting married, and Maya is upset about it. And that's when the whole thing goes upside down, and Miles wanted to tell her from the night before, and he does eventually tell her the truth about Jack and wanting to get out of Los Olivos desperately, while Jack is happy with Miles that he fucked Maya. And Paul Giamatti will work with Alexander Payne again eventually in The Holdovers, as he was great in this movie as he was great in The Holdovers, as he works well with director Alexander Payne. Jack takes Miles wine tasting, while he makes a call from his publisher, Helen, and she tells Miles the novel is a no-go, and Miles is upset about it, and he wants a full glass of wine, and makes a scene in the winery. And I'm no expert at bars and how much to pour a drink for the customers, but that seems to be pretty dangerous to pour a full glass for the customer. Even if they ask it, eventually Miles and Jack get back to the motel, and Stephanie smacks the shit out of Jack because she found out he's getting married, and at this point Jack is fucked. And Miles gets Jack to the hospital while he calls Maya saying he fucked up badly, and he doesn't mind if she never wants to see him ever again until Jack gets bandaged in the face, while Miles is pissed off at Jack as it is. And they at nighttime go out to dinner, and Jack continues to talk with the waitress named Cammy as he wants to fuck her, while Miles uses the restroom and Jack goes back to her place to fuck her. And I guess Jack didn't learn his lesson about his mistakes, but still, Thomas Hayden Church is great in this movie. Friday comes and Miles finds Jack naked back at the motel and tells him Cammy is married to a guy who typically works night shifts. And Jack runs 5 clicks to the motel while naked, and Jack wants to go back to the house to get his wallet with his information, including his wedding rings. And Jack asks Miles for help, and Miles helps Jack by breaking and entering into the house and gets Jack's wallet while Cammy is fucking her husband and dirty talks while at it. And Miles steals Jack's wallet back and gives it to him while Cammy's husband runs out of the house naked, which was graphic for damn sure. And that was rather random, but yet fucking hilarious at the same time. Miles and Jack pack it up and travel their way home. Meanwhile, Jack wants to drive, and Miles lets him drive his car and bumps into a tree, and they make the car break like an accident, which doesn't work, and Jack gets back home in Los Angeles, and he and Miles hug it out before Jack gets into the house. And we move on to Saturday at Jack and Christine's wedding, as it looked like a beautiful ceremony. And after the wedding, Miles bumps into Victoria and her husband Ken, and Miles learns she quit drinking because she's pregnant. And Miles goes back home to San Diego and teaches some 8th graders and eating at a fast food restaurant like life is normal again, until he gets a call from Maya, and she tells him to come visit her as she doesn't work at the restaurant anymore because she's going to graduate from school. And she would love for him to visit her, and he does come back to Los Olivos, visits her. And after watching The Holdovers, I realized the climax in this movie isn't as good as The Holdovers, but does it make it better or worse than The Holdovers? Stick around for the rating and find out. I'll give this movie a 8.4 out of 10. These are absolutely likable characters, as director Alexander Payne and star Paul Giamatti will eventually work together again in The Holdovers, in which I've already reviewed and thought that was a great film. Even better than this movie, in my opinion. But don't get me wrong, this movie is very good, as well as Thomas Hayden Church deserves that Oscar for his performance, as does the adapted screenplay written by Alexander Payne. And this movie is well written, well acted, and well made. The cinematography is absolutely beautiful in this movie, as the editing is tightly done, as I never was bored, as I've seen this movie a lot of times. And it tells a terrific story, while the acting is tremendously said by the actors. And the chemistry between each of the characters are working quite well, as this movie holds up for 2004. Forget that 2009 thing. The movie sometimes goes through funny routes while going through depressing routes, as this is a dark comedy, and the monologue by Virginia Madsen about life was believable. And every time I watch this movie, I get more and more entertained, despite I'm not an alcoholic drinker, unless it's for an occasion. But this is a solid recommendation for this movie, as people who drink wine should watch this movie, as some people will be entertained like myself, others not so much. But this movie still works despite this came out in 2004, but it still works to this day, as it's still a very good movie. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me for this review, and until then, it's time to drink some wine.